Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Friday live stream. Today we are talking about must reads. First of all, whether such a thing exists, and I'll tell you more about what I mean in just a moment. And if they do, what might those titles be? What counts? Okay, so maybe we'll build a list or something. Anyway, we'll have some fun discussing it. Um, I'll tell you the reason. Well, no, actually, before I do that, I'll say to anybody who's joining after the live stream is live. So if you're watching this later on, hit the comments. Let me know. I still want to hear from you. I'll see those comments faster if you make them on YouTube, but if you make them on Facebook, that's fine too. I'll see them eventually. I make a point not to Facebook very much. One day, remind me later on in the stream, and I'll tell you what my theory is on like the purposes of the different social media platforms, and why I don't do Facebook very much. Okay, anyway, the reason this all came up is because tomorrow I'm recording an Author Shelf episode with Randy Dawn, and she selected The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And the reason this book brought up this question is that I never read it. There are lots of books like this. I think I've mentioned on the show I never read Dune. I will. It's definitely on the list. I'll read it, but I haven't prioritized it. Same thing with this. And part of the reason maybe I haven't prioritized it as much is that I kind of knew a lot of the jokes already that just enter the general air, the lexicon. And so I didn't feel like that like I had to. Same thing with Dune. With Dune, I just kind of you absorb basically what the story is and who the characters are and what's going on. And so it doesn't feel like as much of a priority. It might be, maybe I'm wrong about that. But anyway, yeah, that's the topic for today. So I'm interested to hear what you have to say on which books would enter that must-read canon. But I think the first thing we have to address is whether that is a thing at all. Okay, so is Hitchhiker's Guide or Dune or The Lord of the Rings or whatever, are these in fact must-reads? If you want to call yourself fluent in the genre, whatever that may be, fantasy, sci-fi, genre literature, however you want to define it, or whatever you want to call it, are there titles that you have to read if you want to say that you're knowledgeable on the subject? I'm a little bit torn on this question myself because obviously I have gaps, some major gaps like the ones I've mentioned. But on the other hand, it's tough. Like I know that it's tough for me to speak intelligently about the history of the genre without having read something like Dune, right? So, okay. So those are the questions I want to get to today. As we get started, I'll say hello. Lady S thought she was first, but no, Josh beat you to it. So welcome to both of you. Let's see. Lady Sweden says, personally, I don't want a list of it to be just the old classics. There is a lot of newer things going on, and I'm not sure the old ones are required. Yeah, it's we'll get there. Taste is subjective. I think there are a lot of good recs that's kind of similar, but not the same as a must-read. Right. Okay. Some feel necessary, but I feel hesitant. I think that's right where I am, too. Hello, Linnea. Welcome. And oh gosh, now I got to remember how to say your name. Yeah, you're gonna have to remind me. Khalid. I'm gonna call you Khalid for now. Very surprising you've never read Hitchhikers. I know. It's just one of those things. I never quite got around to it, which is stupid because it's a pretty short book, right? I mean, this is read this in a couple hours. So I am gonna read it tonight. For the author's shelf tomorrow. Let's see. I think it depends on how credible you're trying to present as. Well, thank goodness, because I don't. I speak intelligently enough, but I've never tried to position myself as some authority on the genre or something. So. Hitchhiker's Guide is awesome. Yeah, it is. It is. Let's see. I'm going to pull up my calendar. When is this one coming out? This one comes out on the 27th. So 3 weeks from Monday, this episode will come out. So if it's been a little while since you read it, give it a reread. If you've never read it, give it a read. Okay. Meanwhile, I'm going to pour myself some juice. Some juice. Got to get through this. Got to get through this live stream. Okay. So let me see what you guys have to say while I drink my apple-based drink. Okay. This comment gets at where I basically come down on the question of whether there is a list. And that question, it depends. And so the follow-up question is, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to prove? Who are you trying to be, or whatever? And so if you are, if you're a critic or a historian, then I'd say that such a list can exist. If you're just reading for fun, you're just trying to find good books and entertain yourself and learn things and whatnot, then I don't think such a list would exist. And then I think the trickier one is, what if you are a writer yourself, and you want to venture into writing fantasy or sci-fi? Let's just, I guess, maybe we'll take sci-fi first. If you want to write science fiction novels, do you need to read certain books first? And this one's trickier. Okay, so maybe that's what we'll dig into, is do you have to read certain things in order to write certain things? Okay. Oh, thank you, Alice. Okay, that's right. One day I will remember this. But anyway, regardless, I always like seeing returning names and returning faces. So let's see. I think the obvious answer is no, but it's a good idea to at least be knowledgeable of or recognize the ones that were the major influencers. Okay. If you're just trying to talk and have it seem factual, you should read more of the required reading. Okay. Yeah. The Word Less podcast. Welcome. Nice to see you. Let's see. All right. So maybe you don't have to read a list, but at least have knowledge of the past of sci-fi to write it well. I'm thinking of it kind of in stand-up comedy terms. There's a fine line, and so it may be fine, but it is bright, and people draw it in different places. But in comedy, the worst offense that you can give is to steal a joke, right? To plagiarize a joke, try to pass it off on your own. This is a giant no-no in comedy, right? Now, how does that relate to books? When you are writing something, let's say that you have an idea, or you have a way of communicating your idea that someone else has already done. If you stray too closely to that other person, then you're going to be, it may not be quite as like literally run them off the scene the way that comics do, but you will be seen in a certain way. If not as a plagiarist, then as somebody who is unoriginal, et cetera, right? But there's a difference, the similarities and differences and whatnot between ripping something off and homage. And we actually did this on a live stream, like 2 or 3 years ago, homage versus theft, and what the difference might be. And it's been long enough, I can't remember what I said on the subject, but I know we talked about it. Anyway, and so by knowing the genre, by having an idea of the historical position of your book, that allows you to be more informed on where you're landing as far as homage versus theft. But But if you don't read anything else, then you're not actually stealing anything, but you may be perceived to get too close to that line. Yeah, I don't know, something like that. Let's see. If you want to be a writer, why isn't it enough to read, for example, books that were inspired by older books instead of the original source? So, could you read The Sword of Shannara and kind of go, yeah, I got the Lord of the Rings. I got the gist. Could you watch Star Wars and say, yeah, I pretty much got Dune? I don't know, whatever the case may be. Oh, little red book, nice. I mean, I knew that was your thing, but I wasn't sure if it was you behind the name. So there you go. Okay. So sorry, back to this. If is it enough to read old books inspired by the older books? Tough to say. Then yeah, you're getting into like the game of telephone, right? And so if you want to pay homage to something, you're paying homage that's paying homage to something, and it gets a little messy. Um, okay. A writer should, to a certain extent, read the popular classics to understand why and how they became like that. Same for why certain books failed. Oh, interesting. And that's actually this is a smart comment, and something that I think gets overlooked a lot is like it's okay to read bad books or to watch bad movies or whatever. Because it can still be a learning experience. It doesn't have to be you don't have to just read the best stuff all the time. And in fact, it's a good idea sometimes to consume art that is not at the peak of whatever genre. Okay. One can be inspired by Shannara without even thinking about Lord of the Rings. I mean, I know I was. I actually, you guys, tangent time. I just gave my kid The Sword of Shannara. He's 9. That's how old I was when I received it. And so far, so good. I gave it to him like 2 days ago, and he's 9. He's still used to like Dave Pilkey books, like the Dogman books and that sort of thing. So lots of comic type things that he has read, and so he hasn't done a ton of just text chapter books, but he has done quite a few what are they called, Magic Treehouse, and so that's kind of getting him into the idea that you don't have to have pictures constantly with your text. And so I was like, you know what, I think it might be time. He's read the first Harry Potter book, and now I was like, I wonder if I gave him a 700 or 800 page mammoth paperback, how would he do? And he and I told him, I was like, hey, this is a huge book. You don't have to read it fast. It can take you a long time, and that's okay. And so far so good. He's a couple chapters in and seems to be enjoying it. He read it without being prompted yesterday. He just we told him to turn off the video games and find something to do, so he picked up The Sword of Shannara. I really liked it when I was his age. So, and I like it now. I obviously see it differently now, but let's hope it goes well. Okay. One can be inspired by Shannara without even thinking about Lord of the Rings. But Josh says you're still missing the inspiration you might get straight from the Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I mean, that's true. If there is a foundational text in fantasy, it has to be the Lord of the Rings, right? I can't think of any other book that would compete for that in a fantasy setting. In a science fiction setting, it would probably be Dune, but maybe not. Maybe there's something else that you can come up with. Yeah, maybe we should start. Well, let's come up with a list. Fantasy versus sci-fi. What books would you definitely put on this list? In fact, if you do that, I'm going to create a little, see if I can create a spreadsheet. Didn't I do a spreadsheet a while ago? Okay, let's just create a new one. Okay. All right. Is there a genre of books that's so bad it's good? Yeah. There, there is there is a book. I think of this book all the time, and I'm not going to tell you what it is because it is somebody. It's a book by somebody who has appeared on the show, not terribly recently. Okay, so this is somebody who appeared on the show a while ago, and I picked up their book. I might have even talked about this before, but I picked up their book when they asked me to, and they wanted us to cover the book on the show, and I got through the prologue, and I couldn't believe how bad this thing was that I just read. I read through the prologue and I was like, can it possibly get worse? And so I read the first chapter and it kept getting worse. And I couldn't read the book. I couldn't even hate read the book. It was so in fact, it probably transcends so bad it's good and goes straight into the worst thing ever. It was rough. And again, I'm not going to tell you what it is. I will never tell you what it is. But suffice it to say, we will not be covering that book on the show, just because it's so mean spirited. I can't. I can't think about that book without feeling awful for the person who wrote it. So, let's see. I think if you want to write, you should probably read across genres. Read across genres. I think that's true. You know what? I was talking to somebody. Gosh, this was like a year or two ago. I was talking to a writer who said that they took a ton of their inspiration from biographies. They would just read kind of not random biographies. There's no random biographies, but they would read biographies about people they didn't really care about or know that much about, but in reading about someone's life and the things that a biographer thought was interesting and things that this author thought were interesting, they used that to kind of draw their own characters. So, they wouldn't write an entire biography for a character in that way, but it would help them flesh out, here are the kinds of things that maybe make a person who they are in their history, and what I as the author want to know about their childhood and their adolescence and their young adulthood. And it helped them flesh out their characters. I thought that was really smart. So it's like reading nonfiction, but doing it to help your fiction. And obviously you can do that cross genre as well within fiction. So read a bunch of murder mysteries, if you want to kind of learn how to lay clues and then tie everything up at the end of the story. Sanderson's really good at that. Let's see. Sorry for this. I think one could simply not care at all about the classics like Lord of the Rings or Dune. Part of this came, I've been thinking about this topic for a few years because I remember some author who won an award and she gave a speech. I want to say this was down in Australia, but I'm not 100% on that. She gave this speech where she basically railed against the idea that you have to read The Lord of the Rings. She's like, I've never read The Lord of the Rings, and look how great I turned out. And it was, I think conceptually it's fine. It's an absolutely arguable point. It's worth digging into, but she was so angry about it. Maybe she'd had some conversation with somebody who'd gotten upset with her for not reading The Lord of the Rings. She was so upset about it that she set off my defense mechanisms. I was like, screw you. Of course you have to read The Lord of the Rings. And then, once I slowed down and thought about it, I was like, maybe you don't have to. It's tough to say. But the fact that she was so mad about it made me want to say, yeah, you have to read The Lord of the Rings. Uh, let's see. Okay, it's like comparing Ender's Game to Ready Player One, both popular sci-fi books, but for different reasons. Then their sequels are disliked for different reasons. Well, yeah, I don't think we have to get into sequels. Um, I don't. I don't think Ready Player One would be a foundational text in this list, but it's, um, but Ender's Game, you could probably make a decent case for that. Um, okay, let's do this. Let me share my screen here. Okay, share screen. I think it's this one. Okay, yep, that's the one. All right, so let me blow this up here. 36. Merge those. Let's make this big enough to see. And then for the rest of these, we'll do, let's do a good like 18-point font. Okay, so in fact, let's blow this out a little more. Okay. Let's do, you guys, I'm spending too much time on this already, but I don't care. It's my live stream. I do what I want. I do what I want. You're not the boss of me, except some of you who are patrons. You're the boss of me. That's fine. Okay. Fantasy versus sci-fi. Let's, yep. This is getting way too involved, you guys. Okay. Here we go. In fact, we could probably bump that up a little bit so you guys can read it a little better. Okay. Do we have to DM you for the info? What info? Like the book I was talking about? That is not going to happen. I will never tell you what that book was. It's like I'm embarrassed to have read it. So I'm yeah. And of course I haven't read it. I read the first chapter and couldn't get past it. Okay. I don't know. Let's see. I'm not sure. Okay, I missed a bunch of stuff, I think. So I'm not sure what's so bad. Did I tell you about this? I tell Little Red, a few more things than I tell a lot of people. So maybe I told you about it. Okay. So Linnea has always disliked the framing of must read. I remember getting an overall must read list in AP Lit. Immediately did not want to read any of them because I'm a brat. It's also perpetually made me feel bad for failing to read the things I should read. It's tricky. You do want to encourage people to read classics that are classic for a reason and that hold up and that have something to offer, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's a lot in there, but then, are you scaring away somebody who is like, well, I remember reading when I was in 11th grade, so I would have been 16, 17, something like that. I read, what's the Deerslayer? Last of the Mohicans. I read The Last of the Mohicans for an English class, and I was nervous for my oral book report I had to give in front of class, and I was terrified because I hated the book, hated it. And I had my reasons why. I was not just shooting from the hip on that. I had a whole presentation, and I thought about every way that I could try to present the book in a good light and why I liked it, and I just couldn't do it. So I got up in class, I'm sweating bullets, and I just had to say, yeah, no, I hated this book. Laid out my 5-minute case as to why. The teacher asked me to stay after class, and I was like, oh no. And so I stayed after class, and she thanked me for being honest and also said, I hate that book too. So that was kind of a formative experience where when you're talking about encouraging kids and you give them a list of like, these are the foundational texts, it could be you're coming off as saying you need to like these, which is a different thing than saying you should probably read these. But, I don't know, tough to say. The purpose of identifying key or important texts completely changes any list you generate. Ah, yeah, this is kind of what I was talking about before. Understanding the history of the genre is a different list to understanding the current genre. Yeah, this is I mentioned this kind of toward the beginning of the stream. Is it all comes down to like the idea of if a list exists, you have the next question then has to be for what purpose. So I think you're right on that. Okay. So that being said, what books should we what books should we put on our list? Okay. So let me see if I miss any. Then you can say them again, right? But let's see. Being critical. A critical dragon, one might say. One might. I would. Let's see. Ender's Game for sci-fi. I think that is eminently fair. Okay. And we can take some of these off. I'm just going to put down everything you guys say, and then we can debate it in a bit. Let's see. I guess I'll have to read all the books by all the authors. Let's see. Let's see. Brian Atterbury popularized the concept of the fuzzy set when trying to understand fantasy, identifying key texts that illustrate a point, but there's no taproot or text for fantasy. Yeah, I think that's fair. Again, it gets into it depends, right? What are you trying to accomplish? Like I said earlier, if there is a text that you have to read for fantasy, then The Lord of the Rings would be on the list, right? It would have to be at the top of the list, but there might not have to be a list at all. And it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to be a historian or a critic? Are you trying to be an author? Are you just reading for fun? Yeah, there's a lot of it depends in there. Natty Bumpo? Oh gosh, what's the, all Tolkien, let's see. Mistborn is a good fantasy must read. Maybe in like the modern era. Mistborn, maybe. Even that, maybe. I'll have to think about that. Let's see. Realm of the Elderlings. Oh, okay, all right. So, but we have to put a book on there. And for some reason my brain has blocked out the name of the first book, Assassin's Apprentice. Oops. Let's see. Broken Earth, huh? Oh, Harry Potter. Harry Potter. Do we put Harry Potter in here? That's an interesting one. Especially if you want to understand the history of fantasy, I'd say Harry Potter would be on the list. But it's tough. I have a bias against new things. In a context like this, where it's like, hey, look, you're gonna need a generation or 2 or 3 or 10 to prove yourself. Let's see, Silmarillion is number 1. See, I disagree. While it's my favorite book, the Silmarillion, I probably love that more than anything else besides the Lord of the Rings. Maybe they're tied for 1 and 2. I don't know. Let's see. Broken Earth should be up there. All right, so I'll put Broken Earth on there. It is amazing. I love that series. So the Stormlight Archive, I'll write it down, but I have to say I disagree for now because it's still ongoing, and we need to know at least how the first era of it ends before we can say for sure. Let's see. Beowulf. Ooh, boy. Do you need to read Beowulf? That's a whole different category. Let's see. Earth Seed by Octavia Butler. I probably won't write that one. Well, I mean, I'll put it down, but I'll put a question mark on it because I don't know that one. And it seems like and maybe I'm alone in that. Maybe all of you have heard of Earthseed, but I'm guessing that it's not as well known. Um, let's see, Sandman. I bet there's some Neil Gaiman that could go on here. I'm not sure about Sandman. Let's see, Diamond Age, Neil Stevenson. First step in overcoming bias is recognizing it. Oh man, John Carter of Mars. Oh boy. I've read part of it, never finished it, in part because I listened to the episode that our blue team did on that, and sounded so hilariously bad that I just kind of stopped reading it. Okay. Hmm. Oh, did I? I didn't even write down Dune. Obviously, Dune's got to be on there. It should probably be at the top of the list. I don't think books need to have generations to age to acknowledge their cultural and literary significance. That's fair. I'm talking about my own biases that I fight against. How old do you think a book has to be before it can qualify for must read? I don't know about must read. Like it's again, it depends, right? Are you trying to understand the history, like going back decades and centuries? Are you trying to understand the history of a genre, or are you trying to understand where the genre is right now? Because if that's the case, if you're trying to understand where the fantasy genre is right now, then Mistborn would probably make the list. Broken Earth make the list. Um, but like how how much I guess it'll take a while before we know whether and how much impact Broken Earth has on the genre, going forward. We don't know yet. So let's see, how old is that? Those books are like 5-ish years old, right? So no, I think to know whether something has a continued impact takes, I don't know, minimum 10 years, maybe more like 15 or 20, but it's fuzzy, to use a word from AP. Let's see. Oops. Time Machine. Oh, Frankenstein. Yeah, I think the Time Machine is a fair one. Frankenstein is a definitely, like for a historical overview. Um, the Time Machine would be a fair one. I think Frankenstein goes on there just because it's literally the first science fiction novel, as far as I can tell. It actually started in a way that you can't even say about the Lord of the Rings. Like, fantasy as such was a concept before the Lord of the Rings came along, but Frankenstein began science fiction in a way. Let's see. That's fair. Stormlight needs to end first. Yeah, at least 5 books. I know it's planned for 10. We'll see how that all goes, but we need to know how that's why, like, on fantasy, I didn't immediately put down Song of Ice and Fire, although there's an argument to be made that it should be on there, even though it's incomplete, because it did have such an impact. Let's see. Princess of Mars, Time Machines. 20,000 Leagues would be a good one. Up. 20,000 Leagues. Divine Comedy actually would be, oh boy. Then Divine Comedy and Paradise Lost. Oof, 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 oof. Okay. If you're going to put Mistborn, you have to put Lord Fowl's Bane, Gardens of the Moon, The Black Company. Yeah, I think I could get on board with Gardens of the Moon. Probably Black Company as well. Although that's more than just one volume, but we'll let that go. Let's see. See, this is the question. It's up to you. Part of this, the reason I'm doing this whole list here on screen isn't so that we like come down on like here's what the actual list is. It's kind of to just get your mind thinking about this question and what books might go on your list for your purposes. So we're not going to come to any actual conclusions here. I just thought it's an interesting question for us to tackle as a group and individually as well. Earthsea might be on there. Yeah, I mean, I'll put it down. Let's see. Another one that's, like most of these, is it debatable? Sure, it's debatable, but you could make a really strong case for it. Um, let's see. Lucian's True History, 2nd century AD, kind of predates Frankenstein. uh, yeah, no, definitive. Okay, persuasive but not definitive. But that's fine. I've never read Lucian's True History. Um, and I know that with Frankenstein there are holes in the argument, but it's a strong argument to make that that is the first science fiction novel. Um, certainly, you could call it the first of the modern era. If we're going back to the 2nd century AD, I'm comfortable still with Frankenstein. Let's see. Disagree with the latest editions. Yeah, I mean, let's see. I'm going to look over on my shelf. You know what we could put on there is, as long as we're doing debatable ones, you could do The Eye of the World and kind of that whole cycle, the whole Wheel of Time could go on there. Let's see. Well, there's a reason that, speaking of like Divine Comedy and Paradise Lost, there's a reason Brent Weeks, when he came on, chose the Odyssey. Lots of Frankenstein can also be read as Gothic or fantasy. That's true. Absolutely. Polarizing, but Wheel of Time did have a pretty significant impact. Oh, it had a massive impact. If the only thing you want to argue about the impact of the Wheel of Time is that it brought Sanderson to the masses, then that's enough of an impact just by itself. Of course, it's not. It has its own impact, obviously. But with how much Sanderson has shaken up the genre, with how popular his books are, you kind of, like, if he makes a list, it's like, yeah, then so does the Wheel of Time. But, with all of these, they're debatable, but I don't know that Eye of the World alone would count. Well, maybe not, but I'm trying to keep it to one volume on these. Aragon is debatable because it's a good entry to fantasy. I don't think it's very debatable. I don't think Aragon would make any of these lists. That's not to say it isn't what you say it is, a good entry to fantasy. If you want to hand it to a 12-year-old and say, have fun, it's great for that. And I do respect a lot about that book. But no, I don't think you need to read Aragon. I don't think that there's any argument that could be made that you need to read Aragon. Debatable texts. There you go. Let's see. iRobot. iRobot would actually, yeah, I think I would put iRobot on there. It's one of those, like, if only you could probably just go to the Wikipedia entry and read the Asimov's 3 Laws of Robotics. Am I getting that right? Yeah. Anyway, and kind of get what you need to from iRobot, but that's, again, that's debatable. If you have Dune, probably have to put Foundation. Foundation would be a good one. Okay. Brooks and Jordan, yeah, Terry Brooks and Robert Jordan altered the paradigm of Tolkien to the extent that it radically shifted the genre toward the action adventure more commonly associated with the pulps. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it's like with the Sword of Shannara, one of the things that Terry Brooks thought was, oh, what if there was a Western kind of stuck in the middle of the Lord of the Rings? And that's when you get, what was his name? Panamon Creel and Kelset, the troll. There's kind of portion of the book that feels more like a Western than it does like the Lord of the Rings. And so, yeah, they did some really fun things with it and made them pulpier. I think that's a totally fair word. The only thing I caution against when we say pulpy, we think of it as like less worthy or less important, and that's not necessarily what that means. I mean, Starship Troopers was straight pulp, in a way, like when it was published, but now it's regarded as a classic. So let's see. Jurassic Park. Yeah, this there. If you're doing a historical overview and you don't get to any Michael Crichton, that would be a sin. Jurassic Park is a tricky one, and some of these kind of fit in that as well. Even Lord of the Rings to a certain extent, but also something like Harry Potter, where there's a really good adaptation for you to go for. Like in some ways, the Jurassic Park, the book is better than the movie, but in other ways, the movie tells a superior and more succinct story than the books, and anyway, so it's an interesting question if you throw adaptations in here. Do you need to read the book, or are you just trying to get the story, the concepts in the story? Oof. All right. Let's see. Maybe The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That could be. Oh, interesting. If it's about understanding. Okay, well, hang on. I want to come back to that. Oh, my computer's wigging out on me. I think that's fair. It's. I'm mulling. I'm mulling. We're gonna go fast here. Okay, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I think. Yeah, maybe I'll put one of these on there. Okay. If it's about understanding the modern genre, Jackson's adaptation of The Lord of the Rings is more representative of the modern genre. I think that's fair, and that's part of the reason why Christopher Tolkien hated the adaptations, was because it kind of got into what you were just saying, AP, with something like Terry Brooks that pulpified Middle Earth. Jackson's trilogy does some of that, and obviously not to the extent that somebody like Terry Brooks did, but it did take the pulpier elements of the story and magnify them a ton to make it more action-oriented, more palatable to a modern audience. Oh, did I? Okay. Brave New World or 1984? Ooh. Those I probably wouldn't include on either of these lists. There are elements of 1984, obviously, and Brave New World for that matter, that are science fictional. When you're talking about, the screen technologies in 1984, or you're talking about the pharmaceutical technologies in Brave New World, not to mention other things, there are science fictional elements in those. However, I probably wouldn't include them in a survey of science fiction, only because they're not primarily about that. They're primarily social commentary, political texts. And as I'm looking through the list here, I don't think that there are any others that primarily exist as that. Maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, I'm open to criticism on that. Let's see. Oh, okay. Oh, so here's a case. Without them, you don't have the evolution of cyberpunk, or at least certainly not the way that it looks now. I think that's a fair case. Okay. Oh boy, y'all have got me torn now. If it's me, if this is my list, I probably wouldn't put Fahrenheit 451 on there because it's by my lights not very good. Oh. But hey, that's just me. 1984, Brave New World. No. This is yeah. I don't want to be misunderstood here. It's not that you can't have or don't have social and political commentary. I mean, if you read The Lord of the Rings and don't pick up on any social or political commentary, you might be very young or not paying attention. Like those things can exist, but it's like where does your book primarily exist? And you know what? And I think you're right. I think you're persuading me here that like 1984 and Brave New World deserve a spot, because no matter what their purpose is, they are science fiction books. So yeah, okay, all right. All right, I'm with you on that. See this? Yeah, this is why I bring you guys here for these live streams, so you can change my mind. Okay. Man, this is quite the list. So, oh, you know what? Maybe we should create another column here. And the column should be, after I blow it back up, column should be Y. So why would you create a list like this? We've given a few reasons already. Aha. The Dispossessed, the Left Hand of Darkness. I think I'm supposed to do Left Hand of Darkness. We did the Dispossessed. Which I have some thoughts on, but now's not the time. Let's see. Okay. Oops. If you want key texts that explain either genre, then you need to go outside the genre. Well, that's true. I mean, yeah, we talked about kind of cross genre reading a little bit earlier. Yeah. Let's see. Why? Let's see. Or in other words, I want to just read. I want to. Oh, here. That's way too small. Sorry, guys. Let's go up to 18. Yep. Now, what other reasons might we have? So, Alex, we are talking. Why would you ever want to create a list of must-read books? Because if you have a reason, that reason is going to change what would go in the list if you have one at all. Right. So like you don't need the list here, but here you might, and here you might. So let's see what else we got. Show the change in popular culture. Yeah, that would be part of our historical overview. Good examples of specific. Oh yeah, okay. Understand tropes, etc. If you wanted to adapt or adopt, I think would be the better word. If you want to adopt a style, if you're first starting out, you're just starting to write, for instance, you need a style. And the best way to get your own style is to try out, or what, I shouldn't say the best way. A way to create a style would be to imitate others until you get a sense for how you would riff on that, right? And create your own style that way. Like I said, maybe not the best way, but it's certainly a good way to do it. Let's see. Understand the influences on more recent authors. Right, that would be understanding the genre now. Grimm's fairy tales. This would be exactly what AP was just saying. If you want key texts that explain either genre, you need to go outside the genre. So yeah, it's when we think of things like Grimm's fairy tales, are strictly speaking, by a definition, yes, they are fantastical, but fairy tales in that way exist in a different column, I guess. But how much do they inform our current, our current aesthetic sensibilities? Quite a bit, I'm sure. Let's see. First purpose would be certified timeless bangers. There you go. Leave it to Alex to turn a phrase. Certified timeless bangers. Second would be more academic, to provide a baseline. Social commentary. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's like, that would be kind of understanding the history of the genre, understand cultural history. This is why oh gosh, where is he? Tom Shippey's book is called J.R.R. Tolkien, Author of the Century. Not the author of the century, but he called it author of the century without the definite article because his argument was, hey, if you want to understand the 20th century, this would be a place to start with The Lord of the Rings. So, okay. Somebody said something from Heinlein should be on the list. Yeah, definitely. If you're looking for a historical overview, then you'd probably want to read some Heinlein. You could also say that for cultural history as well. Lots of fantasy books are retellings of fairy tales. That's true. I mean, you could say that about Ready Player One, which is basically a fairy tale in in VR, right? So anyway, all right. Well, this is a very interesting list, you guys. And like I said, we're not here to come to any conclusions about, what a list has to have, but more just to ask ourselves the question of, can such a list exist? If it does, what is our purpose for it? And how does that purpose change, what might go on our list? So I don't know. Let's think about that and think about it for yourself. I think that's the most important thing. It's interesting to think about these questions for others, but I think it's, or like in general, but I think it's most useful if we think about it for ourselves. What do I want to get out of my reading? And, like I said at the beginning, with Hitchhiker's Guide, which I will have read by tomorrow, are there any, based on what my goals are there any glaring holes in my reading? And so, like, this has been one of them until today. So, one day I will actually sit down and finally read Dune. Just, I know that is a hole in my list based on what I want to accomplish. So, anyway, let's see. I'm just checking to see if there are any other comments I want to go through. Let's see. To see the art of writing as a purpose. Yeah, kind of understanding tropes and adopting a style and understanding style. Anyway, that's interesting. Yeah, this is a great comment. If you go back to Grimm's, how far? What's your limiting principle? Where do you stop? And again, that's why I was so happy when Brent Weeks chose the Odyssey for us to read for an author's shelf. I was like, you know what? That's actually a great choice for understanding certain, understanding tropes, understanding the history, whatever. All right, you guys. Thanks so much for joining and for awesome participation. I really appreciate it. I am going to, by the way, change the timing for these live streams. Friday afternoons. I do this trying to make these available for those outside the U.S. So AP, you'd be one. Lady Sweden, you'd be one. I try to find a time that accommodates as many people as possible, but it is starting to get in the way of life here, being stuck in the middle of my afternoon. So I'm going to change the time. If you have a preference on what time you'd like to see these or what day you'd like to see it, I'm kind of eyeing Thursdays, maybe a couple hours after this, but I haven't decided yet. Or maybe I do 2 live streams, one kind of earlier in the day on one day in the week, and then one later in the day, another day of the week. I don't know, but we need lots of topics to do that. So if you have any thoughts, head to Discord. If you're not there already, you can comment on this video once it's fully posted. But let me know if you have any preferences. Thanks again, everybody, for hanging out for an hour. I appreciate it, and I will see you all next time.